Are you looking for more out of your life? Do you need ideas on how to start new businesses and how to move forward in your own personal life? Well, guess what? You have come to the right radio show. At You Can Overcome Anything podcast show, you will learn and hear from many people from all walks of life who are sharing their challenges, their stories, the habits, and the mind shifts they had to overcome to become who they are today. On top, you will get a chance to connect and see how you can overcome anything by networking and learning about your next move through this radio show. I present to you our great speakers at You Can Overcome Anything podcast show with your host, CesarRespino. Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of You Can Overcome Anything podcast show. It is your host, CesarRespino, and you can find me at www.CesarRespino.com. Today, I have a special guest. Her name is Britney Gooch. Hey, Britney, how are you?
I'm good, Cesar. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you for being here. So glad to have you here today on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and before we dive in, let me just give our listeners and viewers a little bit of your background. Britney is a young woman who lives her life inspiring until she expires. She's a young woman who has overcame domestic violence, rape, and divorce at a young age. Britney exchanged her ashes for beauty and used everything meant to break her as a fuel to push her into her purpose. She's a published author, motivational speaker, serial entrepreneur, mental health advocate, and philanthropist. And one of the major things you had to overcome over the last couple of years for you is depression. So definitely a lot going on there, and definitely want to learn more about that. Tell me first a little bit about who are you? What was your upbringing like, and where were you born?
Well, I am from Fresno, California. I had a great upbringing, actually. I come from a two-parent home. My parents have been married for 36 years. I have two sisters and a brother. My father was a professional athlete. He played football. And so growing up, I was a kid who stayed busy, and I played sports myself. I ran track and played basketball. And with my father being a professional athlete, he got a lot of attention. So, growing up, we were afforded a very decent lifestyle. However, my parents dealt with a lot of infidelity. And so my brother actually is my half brother on my dad's side, and him and my oldest sister, they have the same birthday, but are a year apart. And he's a year younger than my oldest sister.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So in my book that I have that we can get to later, I talk about the scars I hid behind a smile, because although my father was a great father, was at every back to school night, every basketball game, every track meet, I just really didn't get those values of being taught how to be loved correctly because of the infidelity that, him and my mother experienced. And so as I grew up, I dealt with a lot of daddy issues, just, looking for love in all the wrong places, because I just didn't really see that, in my upbringing. Never would take anything from my father and who he was as a father, because he was a great father, great provider. But as a family, we overcame, that. But that's a little bit about myself. I went to Fresno City College, Fresno State University. I majored in psychology, and then,
Yeah, definitely.
That's where the story comes.
Yeah. One thing you talked about, which I think you see a lot, specifically more so in probably in families that perhaps there's either a mom or dad or some sort of parent missing, where we tend to find love in different places. And you were talking about it, you were looking for that love in the wrong places. And sometimes we're looking for that comfort. And I've seen it from time to time where people might go into gangs or different things of that nature just to find that community or that love. For you, talking about you were looking for love in the wrong places, tell me more about that. What does that mean specifically?
So, for myself, the first person that you typically would see, from another gender is your father, right? As a figure and someone, to love you. And so because I seen my parents deal with so many infidelities, when I say looking for love, I think that I was looking for something other than that, right? My mother is a strong woman. She stayed with my father through a lot of different, adversities. And even with him having a child, a year younger than my oldest sister, she stayed. So, I didn't really believe that being loved correctly was fully exemplified. And so I started looking, I believe, for that, just trying to be loved the right way. A man who wasn't going to cheat, on his girlfriend or wife or whatnot. And so instead of me doing that correctly, I actually did the opposite. And I pretty much built up like a brick wall, right? And I took on, if you will, for lack of better terms, the role of trying to protect myself. So doing the same things that I seen my dad do to not be hurt like my mom was, if that makes sense. So didn't really take it too seriously, but as soon as I would feel like I would get hurt or I started to date and, was dealing with a young man who was dealing with another woman, I started, to do other things and not the way that I should have handled them. So when I say look for love in the wrong places, that's
Right. And definitely. And so as you were growing up, and obviously you went to Fresno State or community college, and then you went through all that, did you ever knew what you wanted to do, or how did the idea of, I think we always grow up with the idea of I want to be something when I grow up, right? And then sometimes we do realize that the dream, and sometimes we end up going someplace else, right? How was it for you in terms of that?
Sure. So growing up, I always wanted to be a pediatrician. Before I knew what pediatrician was, or the term was, I used to always say that I wanted to be a baby doctor. I've always loved helping. I've always been the biggest help in the family, in the kitchen, learning how to cook, in the washroom, helping my mom wash. So I was kind of like the little mom of the home. And so growing up, I wanted to be a pediatrician. And then, life happened. I went to school and I actually married my high school sweetheart that I was with for 10 years. And then, experienced infidelity and a whole nother story. But yeah, growing up, I wanted to be a pediatrician, and here I am now in the mental health space. And so I definitely didn't go to school all those years to become a doctor, but I did figure out a way to put the doctors in my facility. So, that's the space that I am in now, and I'm in mental health, and I have mental health clinics where we serve communities that, need therapeutic services or are dealing with mental health issues. So.
Yeah. One thing that I learned too is that a lot of times from some sort of a pain, a purpose is born. And I think for you, that's exactly what took place. I want to tap in a little bit into this whole idea of domestic violence and this whole thing about being raped at a young age and actually going through all of that. That definitely was not a good experience going through any of that. Yet it seems like now you're using a lot of that to fuel you to do the things that you're doing right now. So tell me about the domestic violence and the rape.
So again, through life's experience, just looking for love in all the wrong places and getting involved with the wrong people, I started dating an older guy who was almost 18 years older than me at the time. And so that really turned into to be very domestic violently when I didn't want to do the things that he asked me to do, if you will. One of those things was relocating back to the city that he was in because I, was no longer there. And so for a long time, I think, people use certain things as just kind of bait, and so he was helping me financially. And again, at the time when I'm decided that I wasn't, going to move back home, then it became violent. And so instead of me getting my family involved or, thinking of if I tell them or, whatever, I just started to believe that all the things that he said he was going to do, as far as like hurt me, kill me, those type of things, I started to believe them. So then I started to isolate, because I didn't want my family to know, what I was going through. But more so, I didn't want to involve anyone and then someone end up getting hurt and me feel like it was my fault. Because I definitely have a support system who cares. But unfortunately, when you are in a violent situation, you start to think other things and you start to believe, those things. And so, being in that situation really taught me a lot, and it definitely has helped me in the space that I'm in now to be more relatable, but definitely just a part of the journey. Thank God I got out with my life. But I experienced a lot in that, in that situation, because I started to isolate. I started to believe the things that, he was telling me that were negative. And even through that relationship is what triggered and what brought up a lot of the emotions from me being raped, because there was things that he picked up on that I put in the back of my head. So instead of, being there for support, he turned that into something to use against me. For example, saying that it was my fault, that I got raped and those type of things. So definitely put me in a really bad space. But thankfully and thank God that I was able to overcome.
Yeah. Now, the rape took place before this relationship or during this, right?
Before this relationship. Correct.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about that experience?
Yeah. So there's a guy who I had met at like a family barbecue, and just like a really cool dude. We were talking on the phone and for a few months, and so he came to visit. At the time I was living in Las Vegas. And so he came to visit Las Vegas and, he hit me up and asked me to come see him. And so I'm grown, right? Go to a casino to meet him. So he's in the casino gambling, and he asked me to walk to his room to drop something off. And so I was just kind of a little hesitant, just because, I wasn't really sure why, he wanted to go to the room, but, he assured me that, oh no, I just have to drop something off. We'll come back downstairs, whatever. And so we walked up, to the room, and one thing led to another. And by the time I really kind of wrapped my head around it, I'm like, I'm getting raped. This is something totally against my will. So I kind of started to fight back. But as I started to, try to stop him, just the aggression became more. And so at that point, I didn't want to continue to panic, because I thought, if I continue to fight back, then he may kill me, or, he may really hurt me really bad. So at that point, I just kind of like gave into it. And I remember being in the bed and trying to get up, but every time I would get up, I would say like his body weight, he kind of forced that. So when he finally kind of got into a deep sleep, I got up and just kind of acted like I was going to go to the restroom and grabbed everything and ran. But I struggled for a long time, because I wondered, well, did I get raped? Was it rape? Because it was somebody that I knew, but it definitely was something that was totally against my will. Not anything, that I planned on doing, not that I wasn't sexually active. It just definitely wasn't anything, that I wanted to engage in. And so I battled with that for a long time. And again, in that past relationship, it wasn't until then he asked, had I been raped? Because sometimes when he would make a move, I would jump a little bit. And then that was something that kind of was a green light for me, that I was dealing with, some PTSD on some type of level, because it was definitely something that I just kind of tried to put in the back of my mind and not deal with, because I just had so many questions, well, was this, or wasn't it, or wasn't my fault? Shouldn't I have went up to the room, and so dealing with that for a long time, that was something that brought that to the forefront for me, that I had to deal with, because it was definitely something that I struggled with for a long time.
Yeah, and definitely, I can already see, kind of going through that experience and going through your divorce. Not only there was a lot of different ideas and thoughts going through your head, being able to come out of that. And so I'm so very interested to learn more about that. A lot of times, again, we have so many negative thoughts going through our heads every single day that if we don't know how to work on our mental health, and kind of help us get through some of those difficult or challenging times, or even think about how can we step outside of whatever we're going through right now and look at the positive side of it, is going to be very hard for us to overcome. And so for you, obviously overcoming that and overcoming your divorce, is that around the time that you kind of fell into depression and you were going through all of that, or was it all around the same time?
Absolutely. Absolutely. At that time, I was young. I got married at 22. I was divorced by 23. And so dealing with that, I had a huge wedding. I had over 550 people at my wedding. I had the wedding of my dreams. People still talk about the wedding.
Yeah.
It was amazing. However, I got married, and a week or 2 weeks, I started dealing with, infidelity and women saying that they had babies and all type of, different stuff. And so I think a lot of it came with embarrassment, because I just got married. My name is pretty big back home. And so I got a lot of questions of like, oh, how's the married life? Because we had just got married and it was the talk of the town and everyone wanted to be there. And, and so I just really started to lie to people and tell them, that everything was good, everything was great, but I was hiding so many scars behind that smile. I really was unhappy. I was really in a very low space. And so, going through my divorce, and then from my divorce being very vulnerable, going into a relationship, and then that becoming, domestically violent. And in between that time, being raped. And so there was all these different things that I was going through because I had never sat down long enough to really figure out who I was and to do the healing work that I needed to do. It was just one situation after the next. And so I started to write because I didn't want to talk to anyone about, what I was going through. One, I was embarrassed. Two, I just was in a space where I felt like I was alone and no one really knew exactly what I was going through. My mom, she dealt with infidelity. So I felt like she couldn't really tell me much because she stayed, and then I have an older sister who is also married to a retired NFL player, but at the time they had just called off a wedding and, since have been remarried for the second time. So the support system that I have, they really weren't strong in that area. So I felt like I didn't really have an outlet. And so dealing with that, I started to write, and I was just in this very low space. I didn't know actually what else to do. And so I became depressed. I became very sick. And then I found myself in the hospital with ulcers. So when I was in the hospital, the doctor just kind of asked what was going on in my life. And, I explained those things, and they said, well, stress can also cause this, and I'm like, wow, I'm so young. But at that time I was hiding so much from so many people. I, was always walking around like I was okay until I got to a very low point and I learned that I was dealing with depression. And so in writing, that is how my book was birthed, Putting on Face. But I never knew that I was going to be an author. I never aspired to be an author. I just was writing, and I decided to join a Christian Bible study group. And it was there that I was prophesied to, that I was writing something that was going to help a lot of people. And surely I didn't think that God wanted to put me on blast and me tell all business, so I prayed about it and prayed about it. And it took me quite a while to write it and complete it. And I couldn't understand why it was taking so long, but it was because that part of my story wasn't over. And so I would write and I would put it down, and I would write and I would put it down. And after much prayer and even, speaking to my family and letting them read my manuscript, because it wasn't a tell-all, but it was definitely my story, but I didn't want to shed a light or, cause embarrassment to my family or make anyone think that I was trying to, put them on blast or defame them or anything. And so obviously all of the names are changed, and, I talk about different cities, but if you know me, then you can kind of put the story together. With that, it was something that I got a lot of healing out of because I was able to write about it and I was able to talk about it. And then it also brought a lot of light to things that we just kind of swept under the rug as a family, so we were able actually to use my book to bring my family healing, and we're closer than ever.
Yeah, and I definitely want to talk more about the book. And one thing you mentioned, I think, is there's different ways that we can kind of work on healing whatever we're going through. And a lot of times, you hear this a lot, oftentimes from people that might be going through some sort of rape or they went through some rape or going through some depression or going through some difficult time. And sometimes people believe that the best thing to do is to keep it inside. And you talk about one form of healing is, you got to be able to put it on into a paper. And obviously, you don't have to go out and write a book. Nevertheless, speak up, say something, put it on a paper, tell someone that is very close to you or something that you truly trust. Because a lot of times we tend to forget in terms of the fact that we have resources that can help us. And so definitely I think that's one way to do it. Besides writing and putting your thoughts into a piece of paper that obviously became now your book, putting on a face. What else did you do or have you done to kind of help you cope with all the things that you've gone through?
Absolutely. So I actually started, which is called the Womanhood Summit. And it's just a platform that my sister and one of my cousins created, and a platform to really just, have a safe space to talk to one another and to really just be that support system and that village. And so with that, we held a free symposium back home in my local community. Where we talked about going from powerless to powerful, which, I spoke on. Again, at the time, my sister was divorced and had 2 children that she was raising by herself. And so she talked about balancing acts, being a mother and a single mother and working, balancing a home. And then my baby sister, she was in a financial planning space at the time. And so she talked about insurance and, disability and financial planning and, life insurance and those type of things. So it definitely has been fuel to push me into my purpose, which is speaking. And so I have done a lot of speaking engagements at a lot of different churches. I do a lot of mentorship for young women that are part of Division of Child Safety. So they've been taken away from their families and put in foster homes or group homes. And so I have definitely used, my book to push me into that purpose and to speak to different, young women, older women, people who just have been through things, to just really, like you said, to speak up and to always be you. And, it's not about where you start, but where you finish. And some things are out of our control, but it's up to us to stay there. So, I definitely have used it to be a light and to shed light on some unfortunate situations that are often silenced.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the book. I'm always fascinated by book titles, and obviously putting on face is pretty interesting. What is the premise behind that? Obviously, we kind of already talked a little bit about it. I want to talk more about that. And then the second thing is, what is one major thing that people can walk away from your book? What is that one message that you want people to walk away from reading your book?
So just to own your truth and own who you are. It took me a while to get there because there were things that I've done that I wasn't proud of. But it definitely has helped me to be in the space that I'm in now. Without a test, you have no testimony. And so with my book, I definitely pray that when someone finishes it and they walk away, I want them to be inspired to know that there's hope for the hopeless. And if you're able to pick yourself back up and put one foot in front of the other, you can make it. Because often a lot of people get lost in depression. They get lost in that space of not knowing, what's next, or not knowing what's to come, or, not being able to overcome those things that happen, that are out of your control. So definitely with putting on face, that's my prayer, that someone walks away knowing that they were meant for greatness and to always be them.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. If people want to connect with you, where can they find you?
Well, I'm on Instagram. I don't have a whole bunch of social media handles because, like I said, I'm a serial entrepreneur. So a lot of the times I'm often working. But my Instagram is Britney Renee 247. So that's BRITNEYRENEE 247 on Instagram. And then I also have a website, www.homenspublishing.com, where you can purchase my book, Putting on Face. And then I also am dropping a luxury clothing line, which is called Signature Required. And that website is signaturerequired.com. And so I'm definitely in the building phases of that, something very new. But I'm also in the personal development space, so personal development coach. And then I can be reached also through Woman's Publishing or my Instagram handle, or even on Signature Required.
Yeah. So talking about a lot of things that you're definitely doing, obviously, are you planning to write another book? You have a book coming, you have a book already you already have a book, you have clothing line, you're a coach. What else do you have going on?
Well, I have those mental health clinics, where we do therapy, for substance abuse, domestic violence. We have a domestic violence program called Healing Matters Most, where we do offender and victim treatment. And then again, I have our kids space, which is called Rising Stars, where a lot of the kids we work with are in Division of Child Safety. So yeah, I'm just growing my businesses and, trying to get as many people as I can touch, to always be them and to stay motivated and to keep climbing.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. So, Britney, what are some of the things that you do on a day-to-day basis to kind of keep you going? I mean, obviously, you've gone through so much. Did you inducted any kind of habits or rituals on a day-to-day basis that you must do every day?
I pray a lot, very spiritual. But I try to stay grounded, I believe that that's very, very important. And because I have been through so much, I don't take anything for granted. Life is very, very, very short. And so, I try to stay as spiritual as possible. When I get those negative thoughts in my head, I definitely try to replace them with positive. I started to read a lot more. And really just take care of that mental space. Sometimes I think we get so consumed with life and so consumed with work and, the next best thing that we kind of forget that our mental space is very, very important, So I try to make sure that I keep good energy around me. I try to always uplift. I always try to serve, that's one of the biggest things that I believe that we were put on earth to do. And so in that capacity, I just try to make sure that, I live every day the best as I can, because tomorrow is never promised.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. And I like one of the things that I have here as one of the comments, always be you and inspire until you expire. Tell me more about that, because I love the way you put that for sure.
Well, I just see so many young people that, are dying every single day, And so that always be you is something that was birthed through putting on face. I took a long time to really figure out who I was. And when I owned who I was, that is where always be you, came from. You can't change your story, and as much as sometimes we may feel that, things that we have done is an embarrassment or we're not so proud of, it's a part of us. And it's definitely something that has developed me into who I am. And so just really owning who I am and always being me and never, turning from that. I believe that you cannot help people with a lie. A facade only lasts so long. And so when we put on these faces, oftentimes we crumble because we're not really being true to ourselves. And so inspiring until you expire, often I get asked, you do so much or you're always trying to help. But I believe being an inspiration and being a leader and being an example is what we need more of. So just, inspiring until you expire. We don't know our date,
Right.
So every day, that's how I live my life.
Yeah, and I definitely always tell people, if you're watching this, you're listening to this message, there's a reason why you're watching this and you're listening to that message. God, the universe, whatever you believe in is not over with you yet. And there's so many things for you to accomplish. And so I like the idea of continue to inspire until you expire. I definitely love that, and definitely going to be utilizing that, because at the end of the day, that is true. We are here today and we are gone tomorrow. And so why not, do that and help somebody else all the way through the end? You just never know, right?
Right.
Yeah, definitely. Britney, you've given us a lot of great nuggets and a lot of great information. If the people that are watching us, if they're going through any kind of challenge, whatever challenge that might be, what is one thing or a couple of things that they can start doing to start overcoming whatever challenge they have in front of them?
One, I would say just really try to get aware, be aware. Acceptance is important, accept the space that you're in, and, try to surround yourself around good, positive people. Energy is contagious. And so if you are around 4 depressed people, you may become the 5th, right? But if you're around 5 rich people, you might become the 6th, right? Eventually, things will get better. So just hold on and keep, the faith and have hope. But most importantly, I would say to really try to channel, your mental space and figure out, those things. And it's okay to get help. I think there's so many stigmas around therapy. If you're in a space where you're finding yourself closed off or you're finding yourself alone, reach out for help. There's more people that will help you than not help you. And I believe that I was in that space. But that was just the trick of the enemy, to think that I couldn't overcome. So definitely, get into that space of your mental health and really listen to your body. Your body will always tell you the right things. I think often we just ignore them. So, just try to get in a space full of energy, positivity, and just keep going, never give up.
Yeah, no, definitely. I love that. I love that. Well, Britney, thank you again for being here on the show today. I really enjoy having you today. Anything else before I let you go?
I enjoyed you, and I appreciate the opportunity. If there's ever any other opportunities, please let me know. Would love to come back and speak to your audience. And God bless you.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much, Britney. And for the rest of you guys, do me a favor. Please make sure you check out this podcast and also share, because somebody needs to hear this message. And please leave us a 5-star review. And I'll see you guys at the next episode of You Can Overcome Anything podcast show. Goodbye.
Do you feel stuck? Do you feel like life is against you? Do you feel like you can't get ahead? Well, we have a podcast for you. You can overcome anything with CesarRespino, real estate investor and real estate coach, NLP practitioner, and author of the book of the same name. Cesar will show you a way to overcome anything in your life through talking with people from all walks of life that have done just that. You Can Overcome Anything podcast available on Spreaker.com.
Thank you for having me today.
I am so glad you tuned in to this podcast. You can find me at Spreaker.com, where you can like and subscribe. And to learn more about myself and my services, you can find me at www.CesarRespino.com, or you can also find me at Facebook under Cesar R. Espino. Once again, thanks for joining me. I am looking forward to having you at the next episode, and know that you truly can overcome anything.